Hello, I'm Rebecca Flaherty, and this is the last in a series of free trailing floral template tutorials that I've been working on with you. This week we're going to be making something very similar to this pattern here. You can get the template to make that from the Pattern Makers Toolkit on my website, and the links for everything that I've mentioned today are in the description. For accessibility, all of my tutorials have fully edited subtitles, and all the chapters are marked out in the description if you want to go ahead and skip to the beginning of the tutorial. This is a more advanced level tutorial, so if you've not ever made a pattern using the diamond method in Procreate before, then I suggest checking out this video first, as it covers everything in a lot more detail and at a beginner friendly pace. I also have lots more beginner friendly pattern tutorials on my channel too, which will help you get better set up with the way I make patterns in Procreate. Let's get started. I'm going to use the Pattern Maker canvas here. If you want to follow along but you don't have the Pattern Maker canvas, you still can. You'll just need to set yourself up a 12-inch square canvas at 300 dpi, and then on an empty layer, just draw yourself a diamond like this one here. It doesn't have to be fancy, it doesn't have to be straight lined. As long as it's a diamond that goes all the way off the edges on all four sides, you're good to go. I'm going to delete that one now because there's already one set up here in the sketch folder of the Pattern Maker canvas. And the first thing I'm going to do is bring in our template. So I'm going to come underneath the sketch diamond and bring my template in. And so this is the template we're going to be using. All the motifs in black we're going to be drawing. The ones in blue we'll make by duplicating the ones we've drawn in black. And these two pink ones on the sides we'll draw in our extra folder later. So we'll get started on the draw here first layer. This is just an empty layer above the diamond, and it's just easier to draw on an empty layer first before we merge it down with the diamond in case there's stuff we need to move around. So I'm going to grab my Fun Sketcher brush from my Pattern Maker canvas brush set, and I'll draw in a nice bright colour so you can see what I'm drawing. And for this week I'm going to draw some freehand daisies rather than using the stamps like we have been so far. And I'm going to do them kind of the daisies where they come up like that, and then you have all of these petals, I couldn't think what they were called then, petals coming out underneath. So that's what we're going to be drawing in these, and I'm going to try and stick mostly to sticking within these circles. So I'm just going to fill up all of these black circles with these like freehand daisy shapes. So as you can see, my sketch layer is often always quite messy, so don't worry about having this looking perfect. It's just to kind of get a feel for where these are going. So what we need to do now is merge this down, draw here first layer, merge it down with our sketch diamond. Then we can duplicate this layer, tap to transform, got snapping and magnetics on and turned all the way up, and then we can drag this down and snap it into this corner here until we have those orange lines, and then we're going to do that into each of these corners. And you'll see that as I do that, these blue circle shapes get filled up with the flowers from this layer. And this is how we'll be building out our tile later. So the only ones we'll actually have to draw are the ones in the middle. So these top four layers, you can pinch those four together, tap, and then we can invert the colours on this layer so that there's contrast and we can see which ones are which. So I'm happy with the layer on that. The only things to be careful for are just if you've gone way outside the edges, like there for example, you need to be careful that you're not then drawing this one too big. But because we've got the template in already, it's quite easy to see what's going to be possibly touching the other bits. And this is only a rough sketch, so we can refine this a bit more as we draw the proper motifs in our pattern folder, which is what we're going to do now. So I'm going to collapse the sketch folder and turn my pattern group on. And then on this layer here, I'm going to start by drawing the stems. If you've watched any of the other tutorials in this series, you'll know that we start with this green stem here. What makes this a trailing floral template is that this goes from one edge of the diamond and crosses over with it down here and effectively joins back up with itself. This curve here is the same one as this curve here. So we start by drawing it up here and taking it over the line on this layer. So I'm going to use my tracing crayon, and on this, the stabilization, I'm going to turn that up a little bit more so I've got a bit more smoothing on there. That can make drawing this initial line a bit easier. I think I might draw these lines nice and thick for this one. So sticking as closely as you can to the green line, take this down and pass the line there. Then we need to duplicate this layer and bring it down there so that we can get this curve in place down there and check that they line up properly. So draw off the edges of your canvas on both of these corners, duplicate this layer, tap to transform and snap it down here. So that's looking kind of okay. That has lined up alright, but it doesn't always, whoops, wrong layer. It doesn't always work like that. If I erase this one, sometimes you can have something that looks a bit more like that where they don't quite meet up. And the way we do that is erase back like I did there, and then just go back onto this layer and just redraw it to blend in with that there. Then you can delete the top part, and then you can just draw in all of the rest of your flower stalks. Then I'll draw in the leaves, but I'll probably use a thinner brush for this. So that's all of the black stems drawn over now. These pink ones we'll do later. The next thing I'm going to do is the daisy middles. So I'll change to this yellow colour for that. So on these parts here, where this is sort of already a lot more of a flattened shape compared to like some of these I've drawn, and it's quite close to that, what I'm going to do is just move that down a little bit, and then I can draw it a bit more of a rounded shape. If you're not feeling confident enough to freehand stuff like this, what I would suggest is in your sketch layer, make this a lot more precise and correct these things in your sketch layer. Then you'll have the opportunity to duplicate them around and see exactly where everything is going to line up. But I'm just going to kind of freehand these and hope for the best. But yeah, if you're not feeling confident on freehanding, that's absolutely what the sketch layer is for. That's kind of the strength of this diamond method, is that you get to see everything in place before you start illustrating, so you know you only are illustrating motifs that you're actually going to use and they're actually going to be in the final position. So like I said, I was a bit lazy just making this sketch layer a bit sloppy. If I was being a bit more precise with it, I would have corrected this in the sketch layer first, but I'm just kind of winging it here today. So then we can fill all these with colour drop. And then, as we always do, to knock out these little hairline gaps there you get, I'm going to duplicate this layer, go to my adjustments and apply a Gaussian blur of 3%. Then I'm going to hide this blurred layer. Then with my automatic select tool, I'm going to tap on this negative space and just adjust the threshold until it comes in not too far so that it's doing stuff like that, but just enough past the edge, but not past this line here which we want to fill. Then you can invert the selection and you'll see we have a layer inside the edges of the shape selected now, so we can add a layer, tap and fill that, and that will knock out all of those gaps on this layer. You can then delete the blurred layer and then pinch those two together. So now I'm going to draw the petals for the daisies. So underneath the heads I'm going to choose white colour for this and just draw in my daisy petals. And then once I've done all these, I'm going to just draw around the edge there so that I know I've closed those all up for when I come to fill them later. So that's all of our daisy petals drawn now, and I'm going to change the background colour to something with a bit more contrast. So I'm going to choose this nice light pink colour. And then that white really pops against that. So the last thing to do is the leaves. Normally I do these first, but I've left these till last so that I can work with the shapes of the daisies a bit more, because I'm going to make these kind of wiggly wobbly leaves. So I'm going to draw these underneath the stems, and I'll draw them in pink to start with, but we'll change up the colours in a bit as we go. So with these leaf shapes, what I want to do is take them out beyond the template that I've drawn. So what I'm going to do is duplicate what we've drawn already around the canvas, the same as our sketch, so that I know exactly where, for example, where I've drawn this flower up there, when I come to draw up here, I know exactly what it's going to be lining up with. So to do that, I'm going to turn off my texture layers, I'm going to turn off my background colour, I'll turn off my sketch at this point as well, and I'll hide the pattern marker. I'm going to swipe down with 3 fingers to copy all, and then I'll come down here, just turn my sketch folder on, and then on the top layer here, I'm going to swipe down with 3 fingers and tap paste. Then I'm going to duplicate this around the canvas, the same as we did with our sketch layers. So just snapping it into each of these corners here. And then doing this will allow me to see where everything's final position is, and I can really adjust the shape of the leaves to fit inside that. So we can hide the one in the middle and then just pinch all of those together to save on layers, or you can leave them on separate layers if you've got enough to do that, but I will go in and just erase that little set of marks there in the middle. Turn my background colour on again now, and I'm just going to go and draw in all these leaves. So on the layer underneath that we added. So now I can be a lot more wiggly and wavy with these, knowing exactly what I'm going to be kind of joining up against as I do it. And then with all those drawn in, we can then colour fill those and then close those gaps the same way. Next we need to draw in our extra motifs, so to do those we're going to swipe down with 3 fingers, tap copy all, and then turn on our extra group, tap on this layer here, swipe down and tap paste. Then you can duplicate this layer, and then this one we will snap over to this edge here with the orange lines, and this one we will snap over to this edge here again until we have those orange lines. Then we can pinch those two together, and if you zoom into the middle you'll see we now have this X instead of a diamond. So now these parts here we can illustrate in this group here, same as we did for our others. So I'll just draw in these leaves here, merging it in with what's showing on this layer here. And then when we come to put this back on the edges, we know it's going to line up perfectly with what is down there. There we go, let's hide this extra group for now, and we just need to decide what we're going to do illustration wise and colouring wise with this. I'm going to turn off my sketch folder now, so we've just got this here, and I just kind of need to have a play around with the colours really. So a fun way to play around with the colours is if you tap, select and have colour fill toggled down here, you can then just choose loads of different colours and experiment with colours that way. It's a lot quicker and easier than having to like colour fill the layer each time. So it gives you a really quick way to scroll between lots of different colour combinations. I think I'm gonna turn my textures on so I can get a better feel for what the colours are going to be, and just do that again. So tap, select, got colour fill enabled, so then we can just choose different colours here. So I've gone for a light green colour for the stems, I've changed the background colour up to a darker peach, and for the leaves I'm going to do a combination of colours using this colour changer brush from the Summer Icon set, which is in the Pattern Maker toolkit. That's free over on my website. So I've got my primary colour set as this dark brownish colour, and then the secondary colour I've got the same as the stems, and this colour changer brush is going to shift between these two extremes, picking colours that fall somewhere in between. So on this pink leaf layer I've alpha locked it, and I can now just alternate the colours of the leaves on this layer. Like some will be really green and then some will be a darker brown. It's entirely random what colour you get. So you can just keep drawing. If you feel like something isn't a good colour and you've got too many darker ones in a row, you can just keep going until you get a different colour to switch it up a bit. So I'm just going to scribble over all of these until I've got a nice combination of colours there. There we go, I'm happy with that combination we've got there. The only thing I'm going to do now is just add a little bit of shading to all of this. So I'm going to, on my daisy petals layer, add a layer above. I'm going to grab my tracing crayon and I'm just going to do a little bit of line work on the petals there. And I'm using the same colour as I use for the background just to add a little bit of interest so it looks like a cutout on the petals. So although I'm liking the earthy colours on this, like my colour spidey senses are just telling me to make this more crazy and colourful. So I'm going to change these yellow daisy heads to a bright pink colour, just to make it look a bit more crazy and colourful. And I'm going to add some shading to those. So I'm going to add a layer above, make it a clipping mask, and we'll change the blend mode to colour burn and the opacity to 40%. And I've got a 50% grey colour here, and with my shading crayon, I'm just going to add a little bit of darker tone to the bottoms of these flower heads. And then I'm going to tap back onto the flower heads layer, tap and add another layer, and we'll make this blend mode on this one colour dodge. Again, 40% for the opacity, and still with the 50% grey. And then we'll just add a touch of that to the top, and you can just see it just adds a little bit of tone variation there. It just helps to make these look a bit more kind of 3D. And then I'm going to use that same principle to add a bit of tonal variation to the leaves. So we'll add a layer above that, make it a clipping mask, and make this one colour burn first and do 40%. Just make the middles of these leaves a bit darker. And then tap back onto the leaves, add a layer above, and we'll make this one colour dodge 40%, and we'll just add a bit of lightness to the edges of the leaves. And then on the stems layer, I'm going to add another colour burn layer above that, colour burn 40%, make it a clipping mask, and I'm just going to add a bit of shadow where the stems come out from underneath the petals like that. Just to add a little bit of depth in there. Then over the petals, I'm going to add a little bit of peach shading coming out from underneath there as well. So we'll make that a clipping mask, and I'm going to grab this lighter peach colour and just add a little bit of that there, just where it pokes out from underneath the flower head. And there we go. And the only thing I want to do now is just go and update those colour changes to what we have in the extra group. So I'll turn that back on. So now that we've updated this with the colours, we can start to build our pattern tile out. So I'm going to hide my extra marker and hide the inserted layer there. Then on our extra group, duplicate that and tap flatten. If you don't have enough layers spare to do that, you can do what I'm going to do now with the pattern group. I'll just move that up there. Hide that one, hide our textures, turn the extra off, and turn the background layer off. So all I've got showing now is my pattern group. So I'm going to swipe down with 3 fingers, tap copy all, and up at the top here, swipe again, and tap paste. Now I've got that flattened copy of everything there as well. So I can turn the background colour on, hide my layers group now. I'll turn this off for now, and let's work on getting this extra part put back over to the edges where it's meant to be. So we need to un-alpha lock it first, and just grab any old brush, make sure we're on the right layer, and put a mark going off each of those corners there. Then we can duplicate this layer, tap to select, and bring it over to this side here. And then do the same with the other one, snapping that over to this side. Pinch those two together and erase those middle marks. Now this extra bit is back over on the edges where it's meant to be. So now we can bring our pattern layer up, and you'll see that blends nicely in there. So we can merge these two together, and then we can duplicate this layer and transform it around the corners of the canvas like we did with our sketch layer. So there we go. Now we can pinch those two together. We can turn our textures layers on, and now that is our finished pattern tile. Using this diamond repeat method means you won't get any gaps when you upload to Spoonflower, but before we export it, it's always good to do a quick test. So I'm going to swipe down with 3 fingers and tap copy all. Come up to the top here, swipe down again and tap paste. Then underneath, I'm going to add a layer and fill it with this dark colour. That way, if there's any gaps on the edges, that dark colour will show through. So on this layer here, I'm going to tap to transform and snap this up to the top quarter of the canvas until that says 1800 pixels. Then we can duplicate this layer, snap it over to this side, and then zoom in there and just make sure that there's no gap there. Then we can pinch these two together, duplicate, tap to transform, and snap them down there. And again, zoom in and just make sure that that's looking okay too. No gaps in this one, so we're okay to merge those two together. You can get rid of that now. And that is our finished pattern. Don't forget you can get the free template and the colour changer brush that I used to do this in the Pattern Maker Toolkit over on my website. It's kind of like Patreon, except the best part is it's free to join. You get access to all the resources in the Pattern Makers Toolkit on my website, including those I make for Skillshare classes, early access to some YouTube tutorials and drawing prompts, discounts in my Etsy store, and one new freebie exclusively via email every month. Talking of my Etsy store, that's where you'll find the Pattern Maker canvas and brush set, as well as a set of premium trailing floral templates just like the one we've used today. If you want to learn more about my Procreate to Photoshop workflow using automations and smart objects, you can find that over on Skillshare. If you're new to Skillshare and you sign up with the link below, you'll get an extra 30 days for free. All the links for everything are in the description. And don't forget to subscribe here on YouTube so you can see more pattern tutorials like this every week. That's all from me. Have fun, stay creative, and I will see you next time.